The further adventures of Treguard are now published in a new book, Nightmare, the Labyrinths of Fear, which includes the game Nightmare. It's available from bookshops, priced £1.99.
Welcome, listeners of Illusion, to Temporal Discussion, the episode-by-episode Nightmare Retrospective podcast. I'm Martin Harder, and I'm a silly thing that makes you laugh.
And I'm Martin O'Donnell, and I have not heard, nor do I wish to hear, the one about the Englishman, the Irishman, and the Goblin.
Now, first of all, before we begin, are you wearing your Temporal Discussion t-shirt?
I am.
I'm being a bit of a traitor today, unfortunately.
You. Ugh, evil. I was actually on YouTube last night playing a kind of a sort of game video where you played sort of Name That Tune.
Okay.
And to my everlasting shame, I actually recognised Funhouse's tune. I'm like, oh, God.
In case you guys haven't guessed, I'm actually wearing a Funhouse t-shirt at the moment. I didn't mind Funhouse. I think the main gripe I had with Funhouse is that if Funhouse was on, it meant that Nightmare wasn't. Other than that, I didn't mind it so much.
I did.
Today we're looking at Series 3, Episode 2, which was originally broadcast on September the 15th, 1989. Ride on Time by Black Box was topping the singles charts, and the number one movie was Lethal Weapon 2. But before we get into the podcast proper, I'd like to address a mistake we made last week. We wrongly stated that Lethal Weapon 2 was topping the box office for many weeks, when in actual fact it had briefly dropped to number 2, and in its place for 1 week only was Sex, Lies and Videotape. The film was directed by Steven Soderbergh and starred James Spader, Andy McDowell and Peter Gallagher.
It's the most provocative film of the year. Vincent Canby in the New York Times calls it one of the best of '89. Exceptionally accomplished and witty.
Being happy isn't all that great. I mean, the last time I was really happy, I got so fat.
The Los Angeles Times calls it brilliant. A delicate and sexually charged film.
Well, we're gonna do it or not.
Rolling Stone says it's dazzling, fun, and scorchingly erotic.
Oh.
Why don't you let me tape you?
Doing what? John and Ann don't have sex anymore.
And Time magazine calls it terrific. The season's smartest and funniest film.
It's for me.
Yeah, it's for you.
Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Is that for me?
Yeah, it's for you.
A Miramax Films release.
I've not seen it myself, but 60% of voters on Salty Popcorn say it's okay.
Sex, Lies and Videotape is a very racy title for what's actually one of the most boring and undramatic films of the late 80s. I saw it once on TV, and I think it was about 1993, and I was remembering all the kerfuffle about it being quite controversial and what have you when it was released at the cinema. But I couldn't see what the fuss was about. All it really is James Spader basically plays yet another of those sexually dysfunctional oddball characters that he's been typecast as down the decades.
Yeah.
And in this case, he's one who seems to get off on watching videos of himself interviewing women about their sexual exploits, and that's about it. It's basically 100 minutes of my life I never got back. Just to say, let's not talk about Black Box or Lethal Weapon 2 again, please.
No, I think we've done that, haven't we?
I think we've covered that.
Now time turns, the recording light burns, time out is gone, the podcast is on.
Greetings. Settle down and grip your chairs, for adventuring is almost here. But before we learn what the future holds, let's peer for a moment into the past. When first the dungeon formed again, there entered Gavin and his men. 4 Scots came southward seeking glory, and this was their all too brief story. The dreadful car they duly dodged, and with a monster they were lodged. But though they charmed an elvish maid, by their own hand they then were slain. For instead of using guile and wit, they went and walked into a pit. Now Suffolk stands where Scotland falls, for Cliff and friends bestride my halls. Their jester's gift can magic make. It's done the trick. Can they escape?
So we've got Again and Men, Glory
okay.
and Story.
That's fine.
Dodged and lodged.
Quite clever, that one. Not bad.
Made and slayed, which although it rhymes, I don't think it's grammatically correct.
The correct word is slain. So, yeah, there's a minus point for that.
Wit and pit.
Much too easy.
Fools and halls.
It sounds actually very, very vaguely suggestive, actually.
Does it?
Yeah, if you actually listen to it, the rest of the sentence, when he talks about walking through my halls, it is just a slightly carry-on dungeon master feel to that.
Must be very slight, because I don't get it.
Oh, don't you? Okay.
And then there's make and escape.
We'll point off for that.
What's wrong with make and escape?
Well, they don't rhyme.
Do they not?
No. Make, escape. They don't rhyme. They don't rhyme. They don't.
All right.
I'm telling you, they don't.
It's not a terrible dungeon ditty. It's definitely not the worst.
I'll give it a pass.
We rejoin Dungeoneer Cliff and his advisors, James, Richard and Matthew, in the water room in level 1. Having just cast the drink spell to reveal an open drain, the team guide Cliff through the passage by instructing him to crawl on all fours.
Now bend down, don't lean forwards too quickly.
Left. Think of the chicken.
Yeah. Go a bit down. Yeah, bit to your left, Cliff. Point yourself. Bit to your left.
And a bit further. Bit further. And again.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, no, forward.
Now crawl forwards.
Where am I? You can stand up now.
At last, the level 1 clue room. Much to be learned here, no doubt. I suggest you begin your investigation.
So we arrive in the variant level 1 clue room. Just to mention, I love the continuity of Cliff still being on all fours as he arrives in the next chamber. But my goodness, it took them a very long time to get to the clue room. I think this is something like the 8th chamber they've been in already.
On the table are a black glove, a bone, and an egg timer.
Look, tell him to hurry. That egg timer goes off. I'm done for.
What happens when the egg timer goes off?
The bees.
The bees?
Cliff is being impressively proactive here. He's almost leaving his teammates behind as he investigates the table, prompting them, should I take this, should I take that? They can't keep up with him. I like that from Dungeoneers. I like that.
There's also a grapefruit which gets knapsacked. Then right on cue.
Ah, turn, intruder, turn and face me, for I am the Brangwyn she, and none passes here without pleasing me.
Extreme caution, team. All those who live within walls are not always wall monsters, but this thing is monstrously dangerous.
Where we used to see Igneous, we now see something altogether new.
Although Tregard seems to be suggesting that the Brangwyn she is not technically a wall monster, all online media I can find refers to her as one, so I think we'll just follow suit.
Yeah. I've been trying to figure out since the day this episode was first broadcast what Brangwyn is supposed to be if she's not a wall monster. The problem is no one ever explains on screen or in the book. She doesn't even appear in the books. Her appearance suggests something Egyptian, so perhaps if we look through Egyptian lore we could find something similar. Her reference to her heart being a bird may be some subtle clue, but after 32 years I've still not cracked that.
Her name suggests she's Welsh, though.
Yeah, Brangwyn may have some connection to the Brol, which is also a Celtic people, as with the Brolican in season 7, but there's nothing explicitly to link them. So whatever she's supposed to be, she has the exact same function as a wall monster. She lives in a wall, and she's clearly a monster. So yeah, let's just stick with calling her a wall monster. On the subject of her being Welsh, the term she is actually Irish, as in banshee. A she is basically a collective term in pre-Christian Irish folklore, paganism about 2,500 years ago, so it covered the collective pantheon of gods and fairy creatures. So why she winds up with a Welsh accent, I don't know. It might be Irish settlers brought the idea into Wales with them and the Romans departed. I don't know.
She is ably voiced by Natasha Pope. Gives her quite a menacing tone.
Yes, but I need to invent a new semi-regular feature discussion at this point.
Okay.
I'm applying it right here. I'm calling it the actors sticking too closely to the script when they should be improvising alert. Brangwyn has set the siren off on this occasion because she tells Cliff to turn and face her when he's already facing her because he didn't bother to walk around the table.
Like Golgara, the Synchrovox style technique was used to make her speak. That's when they superimposed the lips onto an animated object. Other than that, it's business as usual.
The monster poses
3... Riddles!
My heart is like a small bird in captivity, but if my body were built as yours, what would be my heart's prison? Apologies to all Welsh listeners here. I genuinely wasn't taking the piss there.
They said cage. I think they meant rib cage.
Yeah, they actually said rib cage when conferring, but then switched to cage when instructing Cliff, which was a very weird thing to do.
Yeah.
I have to say of this team, I actually think Cliff is a good dungeoneer. I think he's quite proactive.
He's a very good dungeoneer.
Yeah, but I don't think much of his colleagues.
No, there are several times I've noticed where they just fail to listen to him or to what other people are saying.
They fail to listen to Treguard. They don't really listen to each other, and they very, very ponderous. It's weird. Whenever Treguard gives them clues, they don't listen to it. When he doesn't give them clues, they just sit there trying to decide. They spend forever trying to figure it out, and you're thinking, Treguard, give them a clue. Yeah. And of course, you think, well, why bother? They're not going to listen to him.
He did give them two really obvious clues here.
But it's more than that. They actually got the answer.
Yeah.
But then gave the wrong answer to Cliff. It's very, very silly behaviour.
But you can see how exasperated Hugo is with them as well.
Yes.
What do you keep a heart in? For sake! Be sensible!
He said that, did he? Oh, I guess.
I think he
bloody
did.
Should have done.
I think he did in his mind. No excuse for getting that one wrong.
So they get that one wrong, and on to riddle 2. Where are the pillars of Hercules? Most people would assume, given it's a reference to Greek mythology, that they'd be in Greece or one of the Greek islands, but actually no, they are in Gibraltar.
Say Gibraltar, shall I?
Yeah.
Okay, Cliff. Gibraltar.
Truth accepted. Here is my third.
Beneath the waves and far below, the fish now swim where people strolled. Doesn't really rhyme, does it? Where life again can never be, so name the great city beneath the sea.
So, of course, everyone knows the answer to this one is Atlantis. My issue with this question is that in universe, it's completely false. Because in universe, there is life in Atlantis.
So that's what this kind of retroactively becomes inaccurate.
Yeah.
Because an Atlantean becomes Lord Fear's seneschal, Lissard, of course.
We also had the Maya men, which it's suggested are from Atlantis as well.
They may have been plucked out of time from an earlier era, although it doesn't seem terribly clear why Lissard is so frog-like, unless he's been spending a lot of time under the sea. There are other answers. There are the legends of cities beneath the sea. They're not solely focused on Atlantis.
No, but it's the obvious one.
It is the obvious one. It's clearly the one that they were pushing for. Did you ever see the Mysterious Cities of Gold cartoon?
Yes, in fact, I just got Series 2.
Oh, congratulations. It's not bad, is it? Yeah, according to the Mysterious Cities of Gold, there are other answers. According to the folklore in that series, the reason Atlantis sank beneath the waves was because it was a war with another civilization called the Empire of Hiva. Or the Empire of Mu, it's sometimes called as well, depending on which translation you're using. According to the lore there, both cities actually sank beneath the sea during that war. So Hiva or Mu would actually have been a perfectly legitimate answer as well. 2 is the score. The team learn that he will chew on your bones unless they give him something to chew on, and that the first step is music. They're also told that their quest is for the shield, though they may not carry it. And with that, the Brangwyn She demanifests. The team take the bone and the egg timer.
The bees.
Before leaving.
Hey, stop. And side step to your right.
And this is the great corridor of the catacombs. At least it was great, but it seems to be getting smaller.
It's the great court of the catacombs. But listen up, it's different this time. 'Cause he sees the thing, the far wall is closing in and making the space more confined.
Yes, it's the return of the great corridor of the catacombs. In this series, though, they go a step further in the utilisation of threats in the corridor. This is one of the more effective ones, as the far wall is slowly moving toward the dungeoneer. As it does so, it cuts off the far exits, limiting the team's options. If Cliff hangs around too long, he risks meeting a rather sticky end. The team guide him through the near right-hand door just in time.
I very much like this because not quite the first time, but definitely the clearest example yet, there actually is a physically perceptible threat in the corridor of the catacombs, rather than Treguard just talking it up. It's not massively original. I'm a moving wall of the space getting smaller,
but it works.
It works,
as we were saying before, with them crawling through the drain. Because he sidestepped through the door, he now appears sidestepping into the corridor. Little things like that just make me happy. The moving wall itself, it kind of feels like it's what they wanted to do originally, but didn't have the technology at the time. Although I don't know if it's an issue with our copy of the recording, but if you notice, there's a weird graphical glitch on either side of the wall.
What seems to be happening is when the wall scrapes along the sides of the corridor, there are sparks because of scraping rocks, which is actually a good effect. But one of the sparks seems to freeze in position on the top left corner of the screen, suggesting they may not have let the animation run its full course. I think the reason why they couldn't really do this in the first couple of seasons is basically they've animated the whole room. Whereas in the past, where there was animation, it tended to be just a local area. When you're having to animate giant objects or a whole room, it uses up a lot more computer processing power. I think by 1989, the version of the Amiga they had was probably a good 100 megahertz faster. 100 megahertz means nothing today, but it made a massive difference at the time. And so they could fully animate basically all the pictures in the room. So they could do things like moving walls and what have you.
And again. Forward, quickly.
Out of the frying pan into the fire. Don't tarry, team. You'll have to avoid this sting if you're going to reach level 2.
Cliff, you're in the room with a scorpion in his sting. He's shooting out.
After a short dwarf tunnel sequence, Cliff has arrived in the new spectral scorpion room. It's actually the same scorpion room, and it's the same scorpion as before. But this time, as we mentioned in previous episodes, some flagstones have sensibly been removed from the fireplace on the right side. The guaranteed safe path from the first 2 seasons is no longer there. They have to walk through the path of the stinger now. But it's still level 1, and so the challenge isn't too difficult, and the team getting past without any great issue.
We again see the issue they have with the crow-making technique.
Yeah, because Cliff still appears in front of the scorpion's tail after he's past it.
Yeah, they should have just stopped the animation once he was safely past, like they did with the original Hall of Spears.
I also think that Cliff's leg actually brushes a scorpion pincer at one point. Because the path is now so narrow, I'm not sure it's possible to avoid it. I do think perhaps by this point they might have considered giving the scorpion a few other movements. Because the movement is the same 4 or 5 frames every time, the fact that it's just a timing puzzle is not really disguised.
Forwards. Well done. Right. Side step to your right. Stop. And forwards.
Where am I?
Alright, Cliff, firstly, don't move.
Okay.
You're in a room with a single exit. Now, there are some blocks. You're standing on one at the moment, and you could fall off into kind of a pit below.
Okay.
Series 3's version of the Lionhead room does away with the lasers, which I think is a bit of a shame, but it presents a more tricky puzzle. Many of the flagstones are already missing, with a single broken path to the exit. The biggest challenge here is a section that requires the team to guide the Dungeoneer to step diagonally forward left, which was new to most teams of the series and required a surprising amount of working out. What makes it more tense in Cliff's case, though, is the life force clock is moving into amber. The team very carefully guide him over the gap.
Consider your life force, team.
Yeah. Right, sidestep, a very small sidestep to the left, Cliff, and a very small one. Okay, stop. Forwards. Now, go forward, Cliff. Slowly. And again, stop. Now, can you put your... Don't do it yet, but can you put your left leg out?
Maybe we should get him to lie down, actually.
No, put your left leg out... Not yet. Put your left leg out in sort of 45 degrees direction. Quite a large step. Large step, large in that. And then bring your whole body with it. Bring our body bit.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, now move forwards a bit.
I don't think it's difficult to work out. I just think that an awful lot of teams didn't really know how to convey step left diagonally forward. Just saying go to 10:30, that would have done. It is very odd how difficult people seem to find it to find the words just to say go forward left diagonally. It shouldn't be that difficult, but I'm not sure, do the people just not know the word diagonal? I agree with you that it is a shame that the Lion's Head room doesn't have the lasers bit. Well, it would be much more spectacular if the lasers are firing all over the place as Cliff enters the room, and then the pathway is there afterwards. Because I do think the tendency of the lasers to suddenly blast out of nowhere really makes the audience jump. You don't get that now.
They could start blasting the path away as he moves on to the next section as well.
Exactly, yeah. They missed a trick there, I think. The laser version of the puzzle does re-emerge near the end of the season.
But once Cliff is past the diagonal part of the path, the rest is pretty easy. And he moves on through the only door.
Now, there's quite a lengthy dwarf tunnel here, but we actually get a preview of the next chamber whilst Cliff is walking on it, which is unusual for Nightmare.
Get on! That's a giggle, Melisandre. You know it was. Fair's fair now. All right. I bet you haven't heard the one about the Englishman, the Irishman, and the Goblin.
I haven't, and I don't want to. And in any case, there's no point, because absolutely nothing can make me laugh if I don't feel like it, which I don't, in which case absolutely nothing can.
That's it! That's it! Mockley wins the bet!
This is a scene that is very, very regrettable. But we'll go into the details of it, and I'll explain my problems with it later.
It seems that Motley has a bet on with the maiden that he can make her laugh. Although with the quality of Motley's jokes, he's more likely to make her cry. However, the apparent silliness of Cliff's attire does elicit a giggle from her, and when Motley tries to claim victory, she quickly corrects him.
Well, you certainly do not. Why, it was that silly thing that made me laugh. Anyway, it's not really fair. Why, anyone would laugh at that. It's too ridiculous for words.
Well, that's it. That's really it. I've had enough. You wouldn't know a joke if you saw one.
And Motley, you wouldn't know a joke if you told one.
Well, I don't know, though. I can see what you mean.
Motley exits as Melisandre continues to talk to Cliff. She tells him that laughter is the second step and places a cake in the knapsack for him.
Now, you best be going, because Mrs. Grimwald, well, she doesn't like people in her kitchen. And Mr. Grimwald, well, he just doesn't like people. Oh, dear, he's here. Quickly, you must run. He adores me, but he hates anyone else.
Keep going, Cliff.
Here, we're briefly introduced to a new hurry-up mechanic feature of the game, the ogre Mr. Grimwald. Talk a little more about him soon. For some reason, Melisandre is nicknamed Grimwald Grimmy, if you listen carefully to what she's saying, which I would have thought would make him even more bad-tempered. Really, though, could have done without most of this scene. This has already been a very long and very slow level one, and this rather infantile, unfunny series of exchanges between Motley and Melly just slow it down even more. You could say it's good to get a bit of character development for the couple of the new characters, but it's not particularly interesting characterization, if we've been quite honest. Given how long this level one has already been, they could have cut away about 2/3 of this scene with very little lost. So anyway, they escape Grimwald and they arrive in the Serpent's Mouth cabin.
Stop, Cliff. Don't move. You're in a cabin with what appears to be a snake's head in front of you. Now, firstly, don't move. You're on kind of a pinnacle of rock. There's a tongue moving in and out across the room. Presumably will be your path.
One good thing about this team is they do tend to go through the right door each time when given the choice. So as we mentioned before, the Serpent's Mouth chamber is Lilith's old chamber, now with a tongue moving in and out of the Serpent's Mouth, forming a bridge.
If I remember rightly, even back in 1989 when I first saw this, I found myself thinking, good grief, there's even more of level one to get through. It really is painfully slow stuff. I mean, it's not necessarily a problem having an extended level one, as long as things are moving quickly overall, but they're not.
Do you sometimes get the impression that maybe the crew didn't think the team were interesting enough to go on to level 2, so they kept on adding to level 1 to try and kill them?
Yeah, that doesn't really make a lot of sense if you think about it.
No, not really.
This team is so boring, let's add loads of extra rooms. They're not a boring team. I would say Cliff's actually a pretty good dungeoneer. It's just his advisors. They're just not very good.
Well, yeah, take this scene in particular. The tongue's moving pretty fast, and the team initially completely ignore Treguard's warning.
Careful, team. You don't seem to have enough time to get Cliff across safely.
Okay, when we say go, Cliff, I want you to step forwards and stop.
And then they ignore him again.
Wait a minute, I've got.
You haven't enough time.
Okay, Cliff, when I say go, go.
And it's not exactly a subtle clue, is it?
No.
It's really, especially when you really put so much emphasis on the word time.
He's practically grabbing James by the lapel, shaking him.
Yes. Again, he should be.
Yeah.
We're lucky that because Cliff is a good dungeoneer and he's clearly smarter than the others, he stands his ground and actually refuses to cross.
I do like the way he just says, "I've got an egg timer, though."
No, I've got an egg timer.
The bees.
Out of context, that's brilliant.
Even he has got to give hints to his advisors.
Yeah.
Isn't it supposed to be the other way round?
I've got an egg timer. Eventually, they instruct him to turn the egg timer upside down, and I'm not going to
say that. Don't say that. You make it sound like it was that they worked it out. They didn't. He worked it out.
I'm just going to say, I'm fed up with correcting teams every time they say egg timer. I'm just going to say egg timer if they say egg timer.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. They instruct him to carry out the instruction that he suggested.
Yeah, but anyway, however it happens, it finally happens, and he puts it down in front of him. The tongue stops moving, and in doing so forms a bridge leading to the ledge at the far end of the chasm. And the team really awkwardly guide him across.
Curious thing about that new ledge is that I can never see an actual exit at the end of it. I suppose there must be one there, I suppose.
Hurry, Cliff. I've detected footsteps behind you, and they appear to be gaining.
So they arrive at another dwarf tunnel.
And this time, he is again being followed closely by Grimwald.
It's another one of those really silly-looking speed-up the tape to portray running sequences.
I still think it's better than the ice shield, though.
Yes. Yes, I'll tolerate this 100 times before I'll tolerate the ice shield.
So, Grimwald, then. Let's talk about Grimwald.
Okay.
As the role went uncredited, there had been much discussion amongst fans as to who played the ogre. It's suggested by some it might be Erin Geraghty. This was proven false on 2 counts, though. The first being that Erin, who played Mistress Goody, didn't join the cast until Series 4, and the second more obvious one being that Erin is female.
That was back in 2004. Okay, there was very, very little information available at that time. So it was a reasonable wrong guess. You've got to remember, Erin can be a male name as well as a female name.
Yes.
Okay, there's a number of people, a number of males I know called Erin. You're saying that didn't join the cast until Series 4. Well, we didn't know that.
No, of course.
It could have been. It was uncredited in Season 3 and then credited in Season 4.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, in hindsight, we know.
Yeah, at the time we were working on literally nothing.
Some online sleuthing by David Goldstein, aka Drassel in the Nightmare online community, led to the discovery of a photo of the character under which was signed the name B. McNerney. This in turn led him to contact a man by the name of Brian McNerney, and he received the following reply, which was posted on the Interactive Nightmare Lexicon listing for the character.
Sadly, I have to admit to being that man or ogre. I'm astonished that the picture has found its way onto the internet. I do have some fond memories of some of the cast members who were what I'd term proper actors, rather than someone like me who was really only a walk-on or lumber-on, as I seem to recall. They were really fun to be around. Thanks for bringing a smile to my face and giving my kids something else to tease me about, along with the fact that an SFX survey listed me as number 64 in their Who'll Be the Next Doctor Who survey. Isn't life just too bizarre to be ever taken seriously?
That's a bit of an odd one, isn't it?
It is. I'm trying to figure out exactly when that was, because if it was 2005, Brian McNerney was actually longlisted to take over from Christopher Eccleston as Doctor Who. That would have been very different. I'm not a mad fan of David Tennant's Doctor, so it might actually be more interesting as well. According
to the lexicon entry, Brian is an accomplished polymath, historian, writer, photographer, singer, and more recently a Father Christmas for hire. He was also formerly a broadcaster for which he won an award.
They carried on playing the ogre in Season 4 wearing much the same costume.
Yeah.
Although they gave him a fuller head of hair So it might not have been intended to be Grimwald.
But by all accounts, he seems like a very nice man who we know very little about.
At least we've got his name right now.
Where am I?
You're in a room with a door to the right and some woman sitting down. Oh man.
Get out of it! Oh. Good boy, Festus. Good dog. Oh, I wish you were a proper dog. Oh, hello, young Whipplestaff. You come to visit old Mrs. Grimwald, then, haven't you? Well, don't be shy, step all over, that's it. You don't want to worry about Festus. Good boy, Festus. Festus won't bite, as long as we've got a few bones left. He's got a terrible hunger, is Festus, on account of the fact that he's got 2 heads. And you know what they say? 2 heads is hungrier than 1. Get out of it! Good boy, Festus.
So Cliff has emerged in what appears to be the level 1 well chamber, recoloured, but no well visible, not for the first time. Instead, he is greeted by the wife of the ogre, Mrs. Grimwald, who is also the keeper of a 2-headed canine called Festus. Now, Festus is never actually seen in the show. It's very much left up to the imagination.
Which, by the way, I think is brilliant.
Oh, yeah, I think this is definitely an excellent use of artistic filming round the creature rather than including the creature in it.
No matter how good the special effects are, they can't be as good as your own imagination.
Well, that's exactly it. So he spends his time growling from somewhere just off screen. He's described as being something similar to a 2-headed dog. They used to have 3 heads, according to Mrs. G, but then her husband bit one of them off. It must be a lovely household to live in. So Festus is clearly intended as a joke version of Cerberus, the 3-headed canine that supposedly guards the gates of hell. I like Mrs. G. She's an interesting and often amusing successor to Mildred. Well, I do think I preferred Mildred overall, but Mrs. G's a worthy replacement.
Who plays Mrs. G?
Tom Carroll. What Mrs. G has in common with her predecessor, along with that off cloak, is an element of the unpredictable about her. She can be helpful. She can be a hazard. There is something slightly sinister about her, even though she's friendly. What with her taste in pets and husbands, you can be sure she is always formidable. This scene demonstrates that she has similar magic powers to Mildred. Disgusting though the thought is, I do have to mention that there is a 3rd Grimwald. It doesn't appear in this season, but it appears. Don't dwell on this too long, please, for the sake of your own sanity. It does appear that Mr. G and Mrs. G actually reproduced.
Yeah.
Seriously, don't dwell on the acts that created him, but just know that in season 6, a smaller ogre was seen labouring in the upper levels, going by the name of Young Grimwald. Most Nightmare fans, it's never made explicit, but most Nightmare fans assume that he is the son of Mr. and Mrs. Grimwald. And they did something to make him, and we're not going to talk too much about that. So Mrs. G, also, I should say, is basically the kid show equivalent of a drag act, because as I say, she's played by Tom Carroll, aka Olaf. Sensibly, we are never given a real close-up of Mrs. G's face, because that obvious fake nose would be a supremely obvious fake nose if we were. Yes, she is a worthy addition to the series.
Cliff asks Mrs. Grimwald if she has any information for him. But of course, very little is given freely in the dungeon, and Mrs. Grimwald asks what the team have to offer her. Cliff gives her the bone.
Do you want to rephrase that?
No. Okay. I don't want to rephrase that at all. I'm going to leave that in all its glory.
Once again, I have to say the team are pretty stupid here when Mrs. Grimwald asks them what they want.
Traeger basically has to spell it out.
Now then, dearie, you presumably would like to get out of here, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Wouldn't you?
Yes.
Right. Now, how would you want to get out of here then, eh? Now that you've given me this lovely bone for Festus, eh?
Say.
Go out the door. Can you go out the door? Can you go out the door?
Team, you want to get to level 2.
Oh, can we go down? Can we go down?
To get to level 2.
Oh, you want to get to level 2, is it, dearie?
You have been on level 1 for 22 minutes. That's roughly half the time of the first winning quest in season 2. What do you think you want? Treguard still has to tell them you want to get to level 2. We've all been bloody wanting you to get to level 2 for about 3.5 rooms now. And they still need to explain. Has it just been going on in level 1 for so long now? They've forgotten that there's such a thing as level 2. I don't know, but they have to have it spelled out to them.
Well, you'll be wanting a wellway, won't ya? Now then, let me think. Oh, yes, Mrs. G remembers. Twist an ear and ring a bell. Conjure up a dungeon well. Oh, yeah, there is more. This bit you've got to help me with, dearie. Hop 3 times just like a rabbit. Come on, hop 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Very good. Turn around. And there you have it. Grimmy dear, you're home. Look who's come to visit us. Now, Grimwold. How many times have I told you about hating the visitors? You better go, dearie.
Just stop. To your left. Up the well, and into the well. Into the well, Cliff. Into the well.
As Mrs. Grimwald attempts to hold her husband back, the team guide Cliff into the newly visible well, and finally into level 2.
That is the slowest level 1 ever, I'm pretty sure. We'll have to investigate that. It won't be easy because it means actually watching the level 1 of every single quest. But I'm pretty sure that is the longest level 1 ever. Even taking into account the fact there was an unusually large number of rooms in it. Just the dithering and the ponderousness of the advisors guaranteed that it just lasted forever. That
it does make you wonder, though. That's the version that actually went out, which means that's the version with cuts.
Yes. Anyway, one of the very memorable chambers of season 3 opens level 2 now.
Quickly. Hey, you're on an evolving disc with 4 doors around you. No, 5, sorry.
Oh dear, first a fall and then a spin. Caution, team, this isn't as easy as it looks. Very many exits here, but some are safer than others. I suggest you bring Cliff to the brink of this odd device and then launch him on his way.
And it finally happened. The budget finally reached a point where they could afford a revolving stage.
I've got mixed feelings about it, if I'm quite honest. I wish it was something they painted blue, first of all.
Yeah.
So then they could turn it into almost anything and use the rotation effect on top of that. Because they've given it a different color, it has to be what it is, and that immediately restricts what you can do with it.
I don't know, maybe the animation would have eaten up too much computer processing, but if they wanted to repurpose it for another colour or something, or whatever, they could put a cover over it or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think they missed the full potential of this. The Spin Dizzy in itself is a fine idea, no problem with it. But I think what they could have done with it, if they painted it blue, they could have had bits of flame shooting out of the top of it, and the dungeoneer has to try and avoid that as you get to the edge of the disc, and they could have put it in all sorts of situations and added an extra layer to so many of the floor puzzles. There's so much more they could have done with it. There's so much more.
I will say, as someone who has been in productions that utilise a revolving stage, putting a blindfolded kid on one of those, that's very, very brave.
It's cruel. Yeah. What do you think of the Spin Dizzy, Mr. Rich?
I love the Spin Dizzy. It's wonderfully minimalistic. It kind of almost evokes memories of the Wheel of Fate from Series 2.
Oh, yeah, it's clearly influenced by the Wheel of Fate, and would have made a better successor for it than the Dice Room, if you ask me. Indeed, in Season 4, the Spin Dizzy did become the new place of choice, in a somewhat with a very heavily modified background.
There's 5 doors with brick archways forming a semicircle around the far side of the disc. The revolving floor itself seems to have some markings on it to help orientate your eyes as it spins, and the whole thing is surrounded by stars and a haunting blackness.
It looks beautiful. It looks it's a really lovely scene, no doubt about that. It's really absolutely classic early season, early Nightmare architecture in that regard. Absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever.
So there's no obvious right or wrong path here, and it seems like the team are aiming for the central door, but they mistimed the step and send Cliff through the second door from the right instead.
Oh well, that's all about impetus. When you're moving in a circle, the impetus tends to carry you a bit further than you mean it. Got to have a go at the team again here, though, because they are wasting a hell of a lot of time. I make it 5 full cycles of the wheel before they get Cliff to a door.
Yeah, he's getting proper dizzy.
Level 1 had too many locations for this quest, but the team are not helping with all their differing. Cliff is a very respectable dungeoneer, got to say it again, but his advisors are very ponderous.
And I'd like to say, again, blindfolded kid stepping off a revolving stage. If you've ever been to, like, Thorpe Park or one of the theme parks that has, like, a river rapids ride, and imagine stepping onto the revolving station area.
Well, just at any play park on a roundabout, on any play park, you do... You know, when it's moving really fast, if you step off, all the fluids in your ears are still moving in the direction of it. And so you find yourself staggering on in the direction that the roundabout was turning in.
Imagine doing that, but blindfolded.
No, thank you.
Go. Now.
Where am I? Cliff, all right. You're in a room. There are 3
Oh, what bravery! Oh, what skill! Leaps down from level 1. Whee! Leaps off the spin dizzy and exits with abandon to the deep delights of level 2. Pauses now for applause and admiration.
This room is known on Nightmare.com as the Twist Room for reasons which will become obvious in a later episode. This time it's basically being used as a 4-door chamber. There's a table in the middle which Motley is standing on when Cliff enters, which he then jumps down from as he gives his spiel.
Of all the Season 3 architecture, this is the one that's always left me completely nonplussed. It does provide a bit of variety using it in place of the 4-door chambers, but in the end it's so grey and featureless. It's very difficult to see what anyone expected to do with it, and the fact that it's called the Twist Room actually underlines why there's so little you could do with it. It's called the Twist Room because of a spell that was used in there to change the positioning of the doors in a later quest. Because that's the only time they found anything remotely different to do with it. On the whole, it's just there.
This is an important moment in the history of the show, and it's something that really only happens once in the entire run of the show. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, Motley said something here that made me laugh. I was shocked as everyone else. It was an off-the-cuff response to what Cliff says, and it's not particularly funny in itself, but the fact that it was an improvised response just lends some slight humour to it, which I think just affords it a slight chuckle, really.
Well, young Cliff. Cliff. Oh. I suppose you think you're the star turn round here, don't you? Well, don't you?
What should I say?
What should say? You should say no, because it's me, Motley, professional japester and fool extraordinaire that's the toast of this particular dungeon. And don't you forget it.
So, well done, Motley.
It feels interactive rather than completely forced and rehearsed.
Yeah.
It's always, what should I say? Yeah, that is one of Motley's better moments, but that doesn't half tell us something about how many bad ones he has. It's the show displaying a bit of self-aware humour.
Now listen carefully. First right is awful. Second left is worse. Whilst first left's appalling and second right's a curse. Now, I wish that I could help you more, but having said it once, the way ahead is obvious, unless you're just a dunce. Bye now, keep smiling, keep breathing.
And with that, Motley bids goodbye to the team and leaves. The team correctly surmised that the word puzzle was indicating to take the centre door, and they guide Cliff out.
So they enter one of a dwarf tunnel. The level 2 tunnels are red. That is a red one! Which makes you rather wonder what the red liquid might be that is used to decorate the tunnels down here.
Where am I?
You're in the room with a table to your left and a raven sitting on a large raven sitting on a.
I can see a table.
They arrive at the other end of the tunnel in the Raven's courtyard. There's some food on a table here, which quickly gets knapsacked. and a giant raven on a perch near the far wall starts talking.
Who's a pretty boy then? Who's a pretty boy then?
The problem with the Raven is that a lot of the Dungeoneers think that they can somehow interact with it.
Say, good night, Jack. As soon as you realise that it's calling you Jack, it's not, and none of the Dungeoneers are called Jack, it's not going to interact with you.
Yeah. It's also that the whole giant animal thing is starting to get overused in Nightmare.
There's certainly a lot of it in season 3. One of the things that the Raven says is, number 3 is on your knee, which they take to be a clue, and it is. And so the team, realising they're not going to get anything else of interest from this fountain of knowledge, guide Cliff out through the only door.
Is this the first time we've seen the Raven's Courtyard?
It is, because this is the first quest to get to level 2 in season 3.
It's beautiful.
It is. It's a very fine chamber. It's actually based partly on the Jericho 6 chamber in level 3. If you look at the high points in the background, it does give it an awful lot of grandeur, but it does seem a bit wasted on this Raven, doesn't it? And I also do sometimes wonder whether it's possible to climb over the low wall to the left and exit through that big black void, but no one ever tries.
It seems like a good place to have a haunting.
Yeah, it's not a great place to have a giant raven.
Although I suppose it makes sense that the raven's in the courtyard rather than inside.
This is true.
It would have been interesting if they had a Raven Master.
How about a Raven Master? Maybe just a general zookeeper for the. Oh, I don't know. I just don't think they made as much of this room as they might have done.
Where am I? Alright, Cliff, you're in a square room, and I'm down the far end. There are 5 exits. There's what appears to be a giant's foot walking past every so often.
No time for delay, team. I suggest you step on it, but mind something doesn't step on you.
Continuity is not maintained here, notice. Cliff sidesteps out of the Raven's courtyard, but he's walking forward as he arrives here. So they've let the side down there. This is a chamber that was previously used for the moving keyhole puzzle in season 1. It was also the just one door puzzle in Julian's quest in season 2. I think there was also another quest in season 2 where it was a meeting point in space and time of a number of different quests.
That was an interesting idea that they never took as far as they could have.
So although this is the moving keyhole puzzle in the past, there's no more Casper, and there's also no more wasting time trying to put the key in a lock that keeps moving away from you. Instead, what we get here is a giant that's patrolling just on the other side of the doors and keeps on squashing the ground directly behind the doors.
I think it's more than one giant, because they only seem to be going in one direction.
I suppose that's possible, yeah. He might be going round in a circle, and there's another wall in the far distance that he walks along in the other direction.
Yeah, maybe.
Sort of goes round and round. Yeah, it could be the giant from season 1, couldn't it?
Could be.
Or maybe the troll from season 2. So maybe they did appear after all. In the end, it's just a timing puzzle, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it terrified me when I was a kid. And I don't know why. Apart from the implication that you might be stepped on and killed.
I think the first couple of times I watched it, I didn't notice the pattern of the footsteps. Once you realise the pattern, it loses any sting because you know when exactly to move.
Like when we say go, we want you to go forwards quickly. Go. Go.
Where am I?
First of all, Cliff, don't move because there's a pit in front of you.
A what?
A pit.
Oh, pit.
There's a door at the far end and 3 windows.
Oh, come on, team. Anyone who's got this far can't be fooled by this particular obstacle. There are steps to take here. But how can you invoke them?
We're heading into the dying embers of the episode, believe it or not, now.
Yeah.
And we're still only halfway through level 2. It's Merlin's throne room. This is one of the most spectacular looking new bits of architecture. It's replacing the old Hall of Folly. And there's this giant pit in front of Cliff as he enters this rather spectacular place of worship almost.
It's a genuinely interesting puzzle as well, isn't it?
It is. It's pretty well worked. I think they probably got about the maximum out of it. So on the other side of the pit, there's a flagstone sticking out with a symbol on it, which looks a little bit like something from the Crystal Maze. Although the Crystal Maze, I must stress for the lawyers, the Crystal Maze didn't actually start until about a year after this. So there's no hint of stealing in that direction. Maybe there was stealing in the other direction. Beyond that, we got the large, rather ornate wooden chair with a high back on an equally ornate rug. Treguard gives a very, very obvious clue by saying there are steps to take here, and so they have to get Cliff to do some rather embarrassing things to get him across.
Poor Cliff.
The sensation of walking through outer space is very dramatic. In some ways, it feels more like the end of quest locations rather than the middle of quest locations. Perhaps that's why the board game had the throne room at the end of the game rather than right in the middle here. It does feel almost sci-fi, this scene. Not foreshadowing techno sorcery, but just the fact that it seems to be outer space is remarkable.
Musical. Sing a tune. Sing a tune. Okay.
Just sing or something.
Sing a tune. Sing a tune.
Sing it.
Yeah, just do anything. Anything.
The first embarrassing step is Cliff has to sing a song whilst the nation is watching him. His dulcet tones do cause those flagstones to appear, forming the first part of a bridge across the gap.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Okay. Yeah, okay, right. Forward. And move forward.
Slowly.
I do enjoy Hugo's quiet chuckle in the background. That's not Treguard laughing. That is definitely Hugo laughing. One thing I would say against this, I don't think they've chosen the best sound effect for the flagstones when they appear. I think this was one of those ones where the scraping rock noise that was often used in the series, especially on causeway puzzles and when blockers appeared in later seasons, that would have been more suitable here.
Because they had the sound effect for the moving wall, didn't they? They could have used that.
Yeah, they already had it. They already had it active at this point, so it would have made more sense to use it here.
Oh well, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Too late now.
Now laugh.
Right, forward again.
Forwards again.
So he sort of laughs like somebody who's trying to pretend he likes one of Motley's jokes, and the next step appears. And then the final step, he has to kneel down.
Get on your knees. Don't...
Yeah, go
okay, now you go forward.
Stand
on
up.
your knees, on your knees.
For some reason, they insist that Cliff crawls forward rather than stands up and just walks.
Maybe it's like a respect thing for Merlin.
Out of interest, who calls out stop when Cliff reaches the throne?
Keep going forward on your knees. Keep going. Keep going.
Stop!
Stop.
Is it Treguard or is it the floor manager? Because Treguard looks like he's speaking, but the voice doesn't sound like it's his.
I thought it was Merlin.
Well, that's possible. Doesn't sound like Merlin's voice either, though.
At last!
But anyway, with a flash of lightning, Merlin appears. His immediate response echoes something we've said here on the podcast several times, especially in this episode.
Do you know, it actually hurts me to watch sometimes, especially when progress is so painfully slow. Goodness knows what it's like for your parents.
Very, very appropriate for this quest, I have to say. Now, this scene does show the less agreeable side of John Woodnut as a performer. He was a little bit too much in love with being on camera sometimes, and the incredibly over-embellished way he casts a spell just 3 letters long is another useless slowdown for a quest that is already too long.
Oh, yes, you're starving, aren't you? Well, you better have some energy. Now, which spell shall I use? Vigor? No. Oh, of course. Vim. Spellcasting. Vim. V. I. M. Well, that perked you up, I must say.
Is this the first instance of them saying the name of the spell as well as spelling it?
Possibly it was, yeah.
My name's Merlin, and I'm considered pretty hot when it comes to the old magic. And pretty cool when it comes to the new magic as well.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
Now, you're going to need some cards to play, but I'm not handing out the pack willy-nilly. Oh, goodness me, I'm not.
And with that, Merlin launches straight into the riddles.
Some people count on fingers, and some they count on thumbs. But what was the very first machine on which man first did his sums? I had a Casio calculator at the time, and it was so bad, I honestly wondered whether it was an older invention than the abacus. But it was very obviously going to be the abacus.
Yes. But back in those days, if you didn't have an abacus handy, and you needed to count to 21, you could use your fingers, and your thumbs, and your toes. And if you had one, you could use your...
Warning team, your pardon, Merlin. Temporal disruption has set in. Oh dear, temporal disruption complete. Destiny and the fate of this quest will rest on the next question and answer, and we must wait with them. As for the rest of you, remain patient. You must join us again for Nightmare. For when the fire burns, the adventure returns.
So, our reflections on episode 2 of season 3. I have to say it. Although season 3 is generally heralded as probably the best season, I'm not crazy about this episode.
No, apart from the fact that the team are really slow. I think they're trying to cram too many rooms in to kind of show it off.
I think you may have a point there. It takes an incredibly long time to get, in effect, from halfway through level 1 at the beginning to halfway through level 2 at the end of the episode. Level 1 does seem ludicrously long, although that doesn't have to be a problem in itself, provided the action keeps moving. But instead, it only moves in fits and starts with a team of advisors who don't concentrate when receiving clues, take an eternity making up their minds when they don't receive clues. And, you know, if it weren't for the fact that this is the first time we see a lot of these new locations, giving us a taste of something fresh to distract us with, this episode would actually probably be one of the most annoying in season 3.
They are one of the worst teams that we've had so far, with a very good Dungeoneer.
Yeah, they're one of the worst bunches of advisors. They're very lucky to get this far.
They don't even have the, they're not even entertaining.
No.
They're not entertainingly bad.
Cliff can be entertaining, you know, he plays along with the scenario quite a bit, but the rest of them, they're divvying rather than actually doing anything interesting. This is not great TV, is it?
No. And of course, if any of the team are listening, we don't mean any offence by this. We understand that, you know, kids on TV for the first time, it's kind of...
Oh, yeah, sure. There will be freeze-ups, but we don't mean any offence. It's not without redeeming qualities, the episode. As I say, we do get the first look at a number of things. We get introduced to a couple of fairly interesting new characters. I mean, Brangwyn, again, is like Golgarak, is clearly more interesting than either of any of the previous War Monsters.
She's got more of a mysticism about her than the others.
Mrs. Grimwald's an entertaining replacement for Mildred.
Yeah.
It shows off the potential of season 3, while at the same time failing to fulfill it in itself. So you can see there's a lot to look forward to, but here, you're not getting the best of any of it.
That's pretty much it for this episode, so that's pretty much it for our episode. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Nightmare Pod.
If you want to support the podcast, we're Nightmare Pod on Patreon and Ko-fi.
Speaking of Patreon, here's a shout out to Keeper at the Book of Quests, David N. Rabbit, advisors Benjamin Bloom, Peter Pulsford, Peter Sidon, and Stuart Leatherland, and Dungeoneers Peter Coleridge and David Thompson.
Support us on Patreon at Dungeoneer level or above to get your name mentioned on the podcast.
Our website is nightmarepod.co.uk.
And if you're looking for Temple Discussion merchandise, including t-shirts, stickers, and other products, and let's face it, who wouldn't be? I'm sex on a stick when I'm wearing this. It's at nightmarepod.redbubble.com.
You're something on a stick. I tell you that.
Well, that was just offensive.
You can email us at podcast@nightmarepod.co.uk.
And just keep telling yourself, it's only a podcast.
Isn't it?
The bees